Dr. Felucia, and I'm a licensed psychologist. And today I'm going to be talking to you about how one can fall prey to spiritual abuse and how to combat this. In a spiritually abusive environment, or in any kind of spiritual environment in general, it's very easy and very likely for people in that environment to automatically assume good attributes about a spiritual leader that may or may not be present. And I'll explain why. When you have somebody in spiritual authority, we often assume good things and positive things about them. They've been chosen by God. They are the very mouthpiece of God. That's kind of an assumption that we have that we don't even really check out. And so when you're in a situation like this, it's easy to disregard or ignore the possibility that this person can cause harm. If you also think about it this way, there's something known as the halo effect. And that is when we see one positive attribute about a person and we assume that it means that there are other positive things about them as well. So for instance, if we see somebody who's very generous, very kind, maybe charismatic, we would assume that they have several positive attributes. They're just an overall good person and are more likely to disregard things that come up that may not be consistent with that positive view we have of them. And so this is likely to happen in spiritual environments. When people are in a religious setting, they tend to take their spirituality and religion very seriously. And so a reason why this can happen is because we tend to believe this myth about people who, are act as bullies or abusers. And we oftentimes look at them as wounded people with very low self-esteem. We see that in the media, we read about it in books, but actually there's evidence to show that there are a certain subset of people that actually go out of their way to prey on people for their own benefit. So it's not even that they just became bullies or abusive along the way, but they're going out of their way to target people in certain professions, going to certain jobs with this goal in mind. So instead of realizing that this is actually a prideful predator, we tend to look at people who are abusive as well. They're these bullies that have gone through really difficult times. And that may be true with some people. We tend to ignore that there's a predatory and calculated nature about some of these spiritually abusive situations. So that's really important to remember, because when we look at, if we buy into the myth that this is the way all bullies and abusers act, that they're wounded, they have really low self-esteem, they had a really difficult story, that can actually make us not believe or lessen the severity of what's happening to us as a result. So let's say you're in a situation and you are abused by a spiritual leader and you buy into this myth of, well, they had a really difficult life, they have low self-esteem, etc. This might make you doubt the validity of what you've been through, or just write it off as, well, they're just having a difficult time, or they didn't mean it. And that's actually not what the research about predatory narcissistic behavior shows. And so it's really important that we have a clear view that just because you're in a religious setting doesn't make you immune from targeted systematic behavior that is intended to be abusive. The other thing that can make one fall prey to spiritual abuse is the type of environment that religious settings tend to create. And so if you think about it, if you're in a different situation, skills like critical thinking, being, perhaps wanting to wait for evidence before you make a decision, in a religious setting, these can be looked at as negative traits. So for instance, wanting to have more information before you make a decision about something or someone can be construed as lack of faith or doubting. Saying, something doesn't seem right about this person or this situation is looked at as having a critical spirit. Bringing up awareness about abuse or any kind of situation doesn't feel right can be looked at as gossiping or causing division. And so in these environments, the very skills you need to protect yourself from abuse are looked at as bad and weaponized in terms of language. And so no one wants to go to a church where they're labeled a gossiper, a complainer, somebody who doesn't have enough faith, and things like that. So that can make it really difficult just because of the very culture of many religious environments. And so now that we've gone over these, the first one is, our tendency to believe positive things about a spiritual leader that they may not actually be true. And then the second aspect of environments that make what can protect us from spiritual abuse wrong. When we think about those two factors, there are also important ways that we can combat that. And so the first thing is take time, when we think about what I talked about before with assuming good traits about a spiritual leader, the way you can combat that is take your time before you come to a conclusion about somebody. Good traits work independently of one another. You can have somebody who's generous or who appears to be generous, who appears to be kind, and maybe does show some of those behaviors, but could also be somebody else that you don't see behind closed doors. Maybe somebody who lies, somebody who is, who just could is maybe stingy, somebody who is very critical and harsh with their words, abusive towards other people. The fact is, we can't just see one positive attribute and say that this person is an overall good person that will never harm anybody. So that's really important. We have to understand that positive traits work independently of one another. One positive trait doesn't mean the person is an all-around good and harmless person. And then the second thing is we have to understand the difference between speaking the truth, being honest, and also being critical. A lot of times when I listen to stories about people who have been spiritually abused, the type of feedback that they get is that, well, you have a critical spirit, you're complaining, you're divisive, you're gossiping, when they're simply presenting the facts. And so it's important to understand for yourself the difference between being honest and being critical. When somebody is critical, all they do is focus on the negative. This is all that's wrong. They don't look at the whole picture. And when somebody is being honest, they are telling the truth. So for instance, if somebody, let's say you caught your spiritual leader not being honest about something, or maybe there was a situation, where there's been some kind of deceit, exaggeration, like I said before, you are not being critical when you say, hey, I know I thought you said this before, but it seems like this is actually the case. That's not being critical, as being, honest and asking for the truth in that situation. Being critical is saying you're a horrible, no good liar. This lie or this exaggeration is who you are as a person. And so again, it's really important that we understand the difference between being honest, being critical, and also think about the skills that you may be being shamed for in that environment, and how if you're in a different environment, they would actually be positive. So wanting to wait before making a decision about something or come to a conclusion about something or someone is an important life skill. That's showing critical thinking, that is showing using a measured way of looking and assessing a situation instead of just jumping to a conclusion based on a feeling or an impression you have of somebody. So again, I really hope that this information is helpful to you. This was just a brief overview. There's several other things that can contribute to spiritual abuse in situations, and it's really important that if you are in a situation where you are experiencing spiritual abuse, that you get help for that. Talk to a professional mental health practitioner. And also, if you are in any kind of danger, make sure that you call the appropriate resources, whether it's for domestic violence or child abuse, to make sure that you are completely safe. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know down below, and also any other topics you might feel would be helpful for future videos. May you have a peaceful and wonderful day, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Bye-bye.